people in the government who were voted into power are lying to us. And us kids seem to be the only ones who notice and are prepared to call BS. Politicians who sit in their gilded House and Senate seats funded by the NRA telling us nothing could have ever been done to prevent this, we call BS. That us kids don't know what we're talking about, that we're too young to understand how the government works. We call BS. If you agree, register to vote. Contact your local congresspeople and give them a piece of your mind.
That was Emma Gonzalez just days after a former student entered her high school in Parkland, Florida, armed with an AR-15 assault rifle and murdered 17 people, 14 of them students. Emma Gonzalez is now a powerful advocate for gun safety, doing the hard, slow, daily work of holding politicians accountable because, quote, it's their job to make our world better. Joining me now is Emma Gonzalez, who contributed a new book with other founders of the March for Our Lives movement called Glimmer of Hope. Also joining me, Ramon Contreras, national field strategist for March for Our Lives. They both participated in the Road to Change tour this summer to mobilize young voters throughout the country. The tour takes off on October 28th for a final push before the midterms. Good to have you here.
Thank you for having us.
How are you doing?
It's nice. It's very chilly outside. Not really used to that from Florida, but yeah.
You and your classmates were in such a inconceivably awful situation, and also in the midst and right on the backs of that in the national spotlight. And I always just wondered, like, how you have been able to process that all with a little more time.
My mom says I haven't processed it, so we're still working on that personally. But in general, I'm doing the best I can, and I'm trying to connect with my friends as much as possible and contribute to my life as a human being in that manner.
Yeah. The work you guys are doing is specifically targeted at young voters, am I right?
Yes.
What is a sort of idea about how you get young voters who the data shows, particularly with midterms, don't vote at very high rates, how you reach them?
I mean, for a very long time, you know, when people are going out and doing GOTV and when people are doing political campaigns, they don't reach out to the young people, right? They don't create messages that connect with young people. They don't talk about issues that connect with young people. And a lot of the times, right, young people are always looking for ways to get involved. But how can you get involved with a candidate or any type of political process when you just can't connect with it, right? And after the terrible mass shootings that happened, a lot of young people were starting to fear for their own lives because they're going to these schools every day, and you don't know if their school one day might get shot up. So people started to feel, empathy for these people, and they started to say, okay, you know what? Young people my age are dying, right? And they opened up the door to gun violence in different communities, and they made it intersectional, right? Kids every day are dying in Black and brown communities. Kids are dying every day when they go to school. Kids are dying when, they're walking down the street, and people feel connected to that, especially when it's someone your age.
What have you learned in this process of doing this kind of work?
So much. I've learned so much more than I've ever learned in high school. And that's not a diss on my teacher, that's a diss on the public education system of this country. It's pitiful. But, I've learned so many individual experiences that I never knew about. I learned so much about Native Americans that the history books, burned records of practically. There's such a lack of
And this is from going around the country and meeting
going
with
around the
different
country.
groups of people from different backgrounds.
We met with the Native Americans in Standing Rock and the Standing Rock Reservation. We met with, people in Chicago. We met with people in almost, over so many states?
It was like 63 cities.
Yeah.
Yeah. We made at least 63 stops, and it was over 90 events at the end of the whole summer, which is more than any tour ever had. Mm-hmm. And I cannot stress how much of a different person, how much more grown I am and more fleshed out as a human being I have become because of that.
What is the what is the block in terms of the efficacy of politics, particularly at the sort of basic mundane level of registering and going to vote, right? The problems are huge and massive and life and death. The actions you take are these small little minuscule parts of a larger thing, right? A lot of people need to vote to change those, but taking that action is important. How do you communicate that?
Well, a lot of the issues that we talk about, also being on the summer tour, I learned a lot about, my country, right? And I learned that a lot of the controversy, a lot of things that people disagree with is usually in Congress and not within the actual American people, right? Speaking to different Republicans and counter-protesters, even speaking to, countless of Democrats, we realized that we agree on a lot of the issues that we discuss, right? That, out of all the policy points like universal background checks, which 90% of Americans, agree with, right? Out of ERPO, out of disarming, domestic abusers, right? People are on board with this. People support it, right? But the lack of information being received to, certain people, and with our elected officials not representing each American, sometimes people feel a need to be able to combat that rhetoric and that theory that's being pushed out. And what we do is we have those conversations, right? We cross the streets, we talk to those counter protesters, and we say, here's what we believe. We put the politics aside and we talk about real issues. And when we talk about real issues, that's when we meet a common ground, in a middle ground.
I hear that so often from people that are spending a lot of time in political conversations with people that are not professionally in politics. That exact same theme, was that what you encountered as well?
Yeah, exactly. There were so many people that I met. They were like, I don't agree with what you're saying. And we were like, do you know what we're saying? And then we told them what we were saying. And they were like, oh, okay, I think you should say that more. And we're like, that's all we've ever been saying. You just haven't been listening to us. But it's not even their fault. Like, a lot of that messaging doesn't get through to the other side based on the type of media that they consume as a person. And it's hard to reach out and go to other news sites if they're talking about things that you don't want to listen to, but sometimes you just need to branch out and find as much information about a topic as possible.
I think there was a sense when you guys started doing the work that you were doing right in the wake of what happened at your school, that these kids are passionate and idealistic and it's great, but the political system's messy and it's going to chew them up a little bit. And I wonder, a year later, are you more or less hopeful about how things work?
I'm super hopeful. Because I know that there's so many more people in this country who are registered to vote and they're going to vote. They're actually going to turn out to vote. And just because there's a lot of people that are turning out to vote doesn't mean that you can slack off and not vote. Okay, go do that. It's very important. So, but just in general, there's so much more.
You feel like you've seen the light bulb come on with other people.
I'm so much more connected to this country now. I feel way more politically involved than I ever have been. Obviously, I'm advocating in politics.
Right.
But, it comes to a certain point where if you just talk to somebody, you look at them on the street and you're like, don't forget to vote. Everybody is getting further, closer and closer to that point. Also, every day we get closer to the midterms.
Yeah, and Chris, November 6th, America is going to see young people shift the culture of politics in this country. Young people have had enough. Young people have rallied. They've marched, right? They've rallied with us in our summer tours, and we have spoken to young people. We have organized young people, and young people are still organizing across the country. Right? Young people are tired, they've had enough, and they want a Congress that represents them. And that's exactly what they're going to do on November 6th.
And what's really important to remember is that even if you don't see something on your ballot that's there's nothing on my ballot that talks about gun reform, the people that you're voting into office talk about gun reform. Mm-hmm. Go look on their websites and make sure that they're going to put into effect what you want them to put into effect. Any type of topic.
Do you have a way of tracking who votes and who doesn't? Do you have metrics for yourself? Do you have targets for yourself about getting people to the polls?
We want to create non-voters into voters, right? We're not going to specific demographics of people. We're not going to specific voters. We're trying to reach a large group of Americans that just don't have confidence or have lost hope.
More than half of Americans. Let's just be clear. In midterms, it's the majority of eligible voters do not vote.
Yeah, but there's a reason to that, right, Chris? There's a lot of voter suppression that goes on, especially in the state of Texas, right? There's a lot of people who are not educated about, when they have to vote and when, they have to, even register the deadline.
I saw this crazy thing that young people don't vote because they think they're not educated enough. I saw this poll where a lot of millennials were like, well, I'm not smart enough about the issues to vote. And it's no, you're an American. You can totally vote. That's the whole point.
I mean, who's to blame? This goes deeper. It goes into our education system. We need to make sure that we implement, curriculum that teaches people how to be civically engaged and teaches them how to vote. And once we get to that point in this country where we're actually trying to get people out to vote and not suppress them, then we'll have a better functioning democratic process in this country.
Yeah.
And if they're people who feel like they're not smart enough to vote, that's because the system is progressively pushing people down and making you feel like this process is too difficult. You don't have any place in it. Yes, we do. We have every place in it.
That's the whole point. We all do.
Created this so that we would have a representative democracy, and if it's not representative, then we need to continue to change that by voting and actually getting out there.
All right, Emma Gonzalez, Ramon Contreras. Thank you very much. That was awesome.
Thank you.
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me, or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.